This is the turned edge blind hem that we're going to be doing today. Normally you want thread that matches your fabric or maybe a slight shade darker, but I'm going to use a contrasting thread so that you can see what I'm doing. You want to have an arm's length of thread. I usually do like an arm and a half length of thread, and that way when I fold it in half in the eye of my needle, it is almost an arm's length. If you have longer than an arm's length of thread though, it seems counterproductive because then you have to sort of, stop, knot, tie off, and then add more thread. But actually making smaller sections of the hem, actually, if one comes out, then the rest of the hem doesn't come out also. But also having longer thread actually takes you longer to do because it makes your thread tangle more frequently. And then I like a nice short needle with a round eye, since my thread is round also, and that helps the thread spin around in the eye and not tangle as easily as it would if the eye was long and flat. I also like a thread conditioner. I think it cuts down on drag on the thread, and it just kind of helps those tangles and bubbles before they begin. Get your thread conditioner ready and thread your needle. If you hold your thread like this, a little bit longer, it's actually harder to thread your needle because the end of your thread is too flexible. So if you hold your thread so that it's almost invisible between the pinch of your fingers, almost invisible, and you put the eye of the needle over that speck between your fingers, and then just unpinch your fingers, the eye is threaded much faster than if you were to try to have a longer piece of thread in your hand. Make your thread tails almost even. Pretty even is close enough. And then the halfway point of your thread is in the eye of your needle. So now to tie the knot in your needle, you're going to hold your needle with the eye in your dominant hand, and you kind of hold this part of the thread out of the way with your bottom two fingers. Hold the eye of the needle, put the tails on the top of the eye and hold those two, and then just hold about an inch or so away from the needle, and then wrap it about 3 or 4 times, and then put that wrapping that you just did between your fingers also. So you've got the thread that you're holding out of the way with your bottom two fingers, your tails in between your pinched fingers, and the eye of your needle is there too. And now you have the wrap that you added. So all of that is in this one set of pinched fingers on your dominant hand. With your non-dominant hand, you're going to take the tip of your needle, the sharp end, and just pull it through. Don't open the fingers that are holding that wrap and those tails. Just keep pulling. And just slowly pull the sharp end away from the tails. And then you have a nice little knot. And then you just hold your thread conditioner, lay the thread on top, and then put your thumb over the thread and pull it through a few times. And then I like to kind of disperse that conditioner by running my hand over my thread a couple of times. Okay, I'm right-handed, so I like to work right to left when I do this particular stitch. The first thing I did though with my hem is, this is the final length that I want right here. I drew this line. If you were using tailor's chalk, ideally you wouldn't be able to see your line anymore, but I made it hopefully visible for the camera. And then after I marked my finished line, I marked a 1/2 inch up from the cut edge of my fabric, and then I drew another line. And so then I took it to the ironing board and I folded it on the finished line and pressed it on that line. And then I unfold and then fold it on that 1/2 inch line, press it, and then fold it back again to the 1 inch line. This is a 1 inch wide hem here. And then that's my finished length. That's an easy way to get it to stay accurate. And then this edge right here is the turned edge in the turned edge blind hem. So you have a nice finished edge on your fabric inside your garment or your project so that it doesn't fray like this edge is doing. Ideally, this would be a side seam or something, but this is a scrap, so we're just going to have a raw edge. So what you do the first stitch, after you have your knot, you go inside your hem here, and you just put your needle underneath this turned edge and come out right where that crease is. So this is called, I call this the tunnel, because if you look down this turned edge, it's kind of a tunnel in there. So I kind of refer to that as the tunnel in my video. And then I just tuck in my thread tails. You can cut them if they're a little bit longer than 1 inch, but you don't want to just cut them right next to the knot, because then that can sort of work its way out over time as the garment's being worn. You wouldn't normally see the tail either if you had matching thread. So you want about 1 inch of a tail though. Okay, so we came out right here on the top of that crease. So right above this fold now is where we're going to put in our needle in the back fabric, the main fabric. And we're just going to take a bite with the tip of our needle, and we're not going to take a big bite like this, because then our stitch would be visible on the outside of our garment. We want to just look at you kind of look at the weave of the fabric here, and just pick up about 2 or 3 of these threads in the fabric, and just put your needle through there and pull it through. So that's kind of what that looks like. And I'm going to pull it tighter. You don't want to pull it so tight that you change the shape of your fabric, but you want it to be secure. So now where this one is coming out, we're going to go over just slightly here, and we're going to travel in this tunnel. So you're going to go into this crease with your needle, and you notice it's not on the inside or the outside, it's just in this crease. And I'm going to go about 1/2 inch or so long before I come back out with the tip of my needle. And if your thread does this bubble thing, I just drop my needle and kind of run my fingernail down my thread here, and then push those bubbles through the eye of your needle, and then it sort of evens out, and now it's smoothed out. You might have to do that occasionally throughout this process. Okay, so now where this fold is, just directly above it, I'm going to grab a small bite, so 2 or 3 threads in the main fabric, and pull it through. And then I'm going to go into my fabric, my tunnel, move over about 1/2 inch or so, traveling in the tunnel. And you just work your way across doing this. Take a small bite, travel in the tunnel, take another small bite, travel in the tunnel, and you just work your way across the hem this way. So you can see on the other side now, the outside of my garment is going to have these little tiny dimples of thread. That's all you should see on the other side. And if I was using matching thread, you wouldn't even see these, because they would be invisible. Therefore, it would look like your hem is just blind, because you can't see it. It's invisible. Okay, so I came out here. I'm going to go in the tunnel, move about 1/2 inch, and come out. So let's pretend that I've worked my way across, and now I have a short thread. You want to give yourself at least 3 or 4 inches in advance to tie off your thread. So if you see, okay, my thread is running out soon, I've only got about 3 or 4 inches left, I need to stop. I can't continue to use the rest of the thread on my needle, because then I won't have enough room on my thread to knot my needle. So now when I need to knot it, when I've come to the tunnel again, now I've gone through the tunnel, and now instead of going into the fabric again, I'm just going to sneak on this side of the tunnel in this seam allowance and just take a little bite. You can take a little bit bigger of a bite than you did on the other side, because it's not going to be visible anyway. Take a little bite, a little stitch, and then we're going to do that one more time in the same place. But before we let that loop close all the way in that second bite that we took, we're going to put our needle into that loop, and now we're going to be making, now in doing that we made a second loop. So now we have the first loop here, this small one, and then this bigger one is the second loop. So we're going to let the second loop get smaller, but don't let it close. You want the first loop to close before the second loop. So I'm going to hold my second loop and just pull the back side of it until the first loop closes. So now here's my second loop. Now, instead of letting my second loop close, I'm going to put my needle into that to make a third loop. So second loop, third loop, and then pull my needle thread, and I just give it a couple of quick tugs. Both of these loops can close together at the same time. So the second loop cannot close before the first loop, but the second and third loops close together. So one more time, here's a little bite. Here's my first loop. So I kind of put my thumb in it or something to stop it from closing all the way before I want it to. And then I put my needle into that first loop. Oops. Sometimes it twists closed, and that's normal. So I just kind of go down here near the end, near the fabric, and grab the part that's not twisted. Put my needle into that first loop and hold the second loop from closing before the first loop. So this is my second loop right here, and then here's the first loop right here. So I'm gonna hold my second loop, and this part right here, if you just pull that first loop will close. Okay, and then I'm going to put my needle in to make a third loop. So needle into the second loop. Now I have second and third loops on my needle, and I just let them both close. A couple of quick tugs. And I like to put my needle inside here to get my tail to stay inside. And then I just cut my tail about 1 inch long or so. And then that's how you tie off. And then you can add another thread. So I'll show you how to add the other thread, because this is pretty normal. You rarely can do an entire hem with one needle of thread. You usually have to tie off and start again. And that's okay, because if one comes out, the other one, at least your entire hem didn't come out. Maybe only a few inches of it did. So I've got my matching thread here. We'll see what that looks like. So I'm going to hold my tail, the end of my thread, so between my fingers that you can't hardly see much of it. And put the eye of my needle near that tail and just unpinch my fingers. And when you unpinch, it's in the eye. Okay. Your tails can be even-ish. They don't have to be perfectly even. Mine are even-ish. Eye of the needle in your hand, in your pinch. Add the tails to the pinch. Wrap 3 times. Hold the pinch. Hold the wraps in the pinch. And pull through. There we go. So now to add to, I'm not going to start on the end again because I've stopped and started. So now I'm going to put my needle under my turned edge here and hide my knot, and I'm going to actually come back here. So here's the knot that I made in my last thread. So I'm going to put my needle under the turned edge here and come out right here on the edge of this fold on the edge of the tunnel. That way I'm slightly overlapping my knots here. And then I'm going to fold my fabric back and continue with my taking little bites with the tip of my needle. Okay, I took my little bite and now I'm going to run into the tunnel with my needle, and here's the knot that I made with my other thread, so I'm going to be overlapping that slightly. Go into my tunnel. Okay, take another bite in my fabric, go into the tunnel. You wouldn't normally see this line with your crease, but I made it stay there so that you could see where I folded. Just right above. You don't want to go way up here because then your stitch is actually going to be kind of up here, and then that's not as nice looking. So you want to just go right above this fold. Take a couple of strands of thread and then go back into the tunnel here. And just do that all the way around your hem. So you should get a little bit of a kind of an upside down V. If you look, your stitches kind of make a little upside down V on the top edge there. And then on the other side, your stitches are invisible if you use the right color thread. So that is the turned edge blind hem.